children lived here.
We were sleeping. The kids were watching TV. At first, what I heard wasn't a loud noise. I thought okay and rushed outside. Suddenly there was a huge explosion that leveled our houses. All the houses around here are destroyed. Many people are under rubble, some dead, some wounded. Many ambulances came. Some people lost their legs.
Dozens of the dead have been pulled out of the rubble. It's still not clear how many are trapped. Rescuers call for silence to try and hear any signs of life. The missile struck while most people in Azerbaijan's second largest city, Ganja, were sleeping. The strike has levelled rows of houses and ripped the roofs off buildings in the surrounding streets. Ganja is 100 kilometres from the front line in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region. Early reports indicate that ballistic missiles were used in the attack.
Starting with France, a history teacher who discussed caricatures of Prophet Muhammad with his students was beheaded and the suspect was shot dead by the police near Paris. The attack took place in the street in front of the school where the victim worked. This gruesome incident happened in a suburb around 40 kilometers from Paris. The attacker, armed with a knife and an air gun, was shot dead a few streets away from where the teacher was beheaded. According to a judicial source, the suspect was an 18-year-old born in Moscow and originating from Russia's Censorship, according to the police. Now, the attacker shouted Allahu Akbar or God is greatest as they confronted him. 5 more people have been detained over the murder, including the parents of a child at the school where the teacher was working.
The Japan Times has reported that the Japan Air Self-Defense Force has a plan to increase the number of airbases which will host the newest F-35 fighter jets. According to Japan's largest English-language daily newspaper, Defense Ministry is looking at deploying new F-35A state-of-the-art stealth fighters to Air Self-Defense Force bases other than the current host, the Misawa base in Aomori Prefecture. The ministry sought 40.2 billion yen in its budget request for fiscal 2021 to acquire 4 F-35 as in fiscal 2025. When the number of F-35s increases, new fighters may be deployed to bases other than Misawa that currently operate fighter jets, a ministry official said. As we need to gain approval from local communities, we have not decided yet where to deploy them.
The United Nations is warning of a new wave of violence in Afghanistan. Tens of thousands of civilians have been driven from their homes by a major offensive by the Taliban in the southern province of Helmand. That's where British troops were mainly based while fighting in Afghanistan. Over 450 British service personnel were killed during a 14-year period. Now the fresh fighting is threatening fragile peace talks between the Afghan government and the Taliban.
Helicopter fire over Helmand again. The Afghan military pounding Taliban targets. A week of all-out war after the Taliban took more territory. Another week of suffering for civilians. Afghans escaping the violence. Lives upended again.
The old Ramkral prison site was meant to be converted into a new Free State legislature complex, but the National Heritage Site remains a derelict shelf of its former self. To add insult to injury, more than 120 million rand budgeted for the project 10 years ago is unaccounted for.
They also paid for a fence, and if you go there now, I mean, we've got pictures and we've been there with all the media houses the previous time also, and there's nothing. There's no fence there at the moment, and if we talk about value for money, what had happened with that money? Where has it been spent?
We have to regain the taxpayers' money, and the guilty parties has to be prosecuted, and according to the law, the law has to take its way.
The Labour Party has seen dozens of MPs vote down the controversial licence to kill legislation despite leader Sir Keir Starmer's order to abstain. The bill was passed in the Commons with Tory votes. Well, the bill itself enacts certain powers which a top judge admitted already effectively existed for the security services. It will protect undercover operatives from prosecution. But campaigners argue it gives government agencies a licence to commit murder along with other criminal activities. Well, to discuss this, I'm now joined by anti-torture campaigner Keith Bess. Keith, thank you for joining us. Not much has changed. MI5 already had these clandestine powers, didn't they?
Well, not really, no. I mean, the point is that obviously anybody operating in this country is subject to the European Convention on Human Rights, which has certain articles from which you cannot derogate. One, of course, is the right to life.
Voters are hoping the general election on Sunday will bring some stability to Bolivia. They've been grappling with political unrest since the last presidential election result was annulled last October and Evo Morales forced to resign. The country has been hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic, with more than 8,000 deaths. Opinion polls show people want more economic certainty, and who they elected will be crucial for the development of industries such as natural gas and lithium mining. Leading the race is Luis Arce. He was the economy minister during the presidency of Evo Morales, who ran the country for 13 years.
Let's now shift focus to Pakistan, where the top opposition leaders put on a massive show of strength in Gujranwala to protest against the government of Prime Minister Imran Khan. The recently formed Pakistan Democratic Movement held the first protest rally in the city of Gujranwala, with the claim to lay the foundation for the ouster of Imran Khan's government. Thousands of political workers and supporters from across Pakistan attended this rally, and it was perhaps one of the biggest shows of strength by the mostly fragmented Pakistani opposition in recent years. The recently formed movement comprises 11 parties, including the PMLN, the PPP, as well as the JUIF. Nawaz Sharif also addressed the rally through a video link from London, where he accused the country's army chief, General Qamar Javed Bajwa, of toppling his government. He also targeted General Asim Bajwa for the state of the country.
In Kenya's Orpageta Conservancy, a group of vultures is enjoying a feast. But scenes like this are getting scarcer, and the danger to these scavengers is often lying in their food. Dr. Darcy Ogarda is Assistant Director of Programs at conservation group The Peregrine Fund.
Well, the biggest threat to vultures is poisoning, and that is generally not targeted at the vultures, it's actually targeted at carnivores, mostly lions, hyenas, leopards as well, because the carnivores are actually occasionally killing livestock.
When farmers lace carcasses with pesticides, it's often vultures and other birds of prey that are first at the scene. Several dozen birds can die in a single poisoning, and it takes decades for the population to recover due to their long lives and slow breeding patterns.
Censorship is alive and well heading into the 2020 elections. Twitter isn't the only mega corporation actively working to suppress opposing viewpoints. On Wednesday, One America News released a report exposing the dangers of voting fraud and cited numerous examples demonstrating that fraudulent voting can and does happen. Some of those examples come from our own employees who have personally received multiple ballots delivered to their homes. But none of that seems to matter to YouTube, and after reviewing our report, they promptly censored it. After achieving some 14,000 views, YouTube swooped in and muted the video's audio, making it impossible for anyone to understand what was happening in the report. Also, the video now features this warning at the bottom, an apparent attempt from YouTube to fact-check the report, insisting that all valid votes are counted in every election regardless of how they are cast.
Well, Tokes, this new policy move by YouTube certainly seems to be following the lead of others like Facebook and Twitter. The Google-owned media sharing company announcing in a blog post on Thursday that they will now be prohibiting any content that is targeted towards individual groups with conspiracy theories, especially where it has the potential to justify or lead to real-world violence. This is an extension of their already existing rules when it comes to harassment and hate on the platform. Now, QAnon is a particular example that they have cited. That is a baseless conspiracy theory that Donald Trump, the United States president, is seemingly a slayer against a corrupt and elite child trafficking ring. Now, to try and stop the spread of this unfounded theory, a lot of platforms have tried to be taking action over the last few months. Back in July, Twitter announced that they were strengthening their enforcement policies, especially against behavior that could lead to offline harm. Then, just last week, Facebook went even further, saying that they would be banning accounts, pages and groups which represented QAnon, even if they did not contain violent content, seemingly a step up there from Facebook.